Welcome to Clause8, the #1 podcast on intellectual property, trusted by top in-house counsel, judges, and policymakers worldwide. Hosted by Eli Mazour, we bring you in-depth conversations with the personality shaping IP. Brought to you by Tradespace, where ideas take flight.
Joel, thank you so much for joining Clause8. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, and how does IP play a part in all that?
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Joel Meyer. I am the VP of IP and Innovation Strategy at Digimarc Corporation. It's been a tremendous run for me working there. I've been there for the last 25 years, and it's really it's been super fun because IP and patents in particular have been a core part of the strategy since the beginning of our company. We are a pioneer of a technology called digital watermarking, which is a way of embedding data and media of all kinds. It can be physical objects or movies or music. And at the time, it was really a kind of a pioneering technology for securing documents like counterfeit returns of banknotes, but also protecting the movie industry and the music industry from copying. And after the bubble burst, the technology kind of went out of favor in the digital domain, but we pursued a number of applications in a variety of counterfeit deterrence applications and physical object watermarking applications. Today, it's having a revival in the world of generative AI as a tool to ensure the authenticity and provenance of digital media. So I've had the joy of navigating the IP strategy through all the twists and turns of this technology as it's evolved over the years.
And it's hard to think back maybe, but going back 25 years when you first joined Digimarc, what did you think about the role that IP should play within a company to kind of your thoughts today? Can you talk a little bit about that evolution?
Yeah. No, I think over the span of my career, we've really seen kind of the rise of the strength of the IP protection system, namely the patent system. And then, frankly, some challenges that have occurred after the Alice decision and the American Invents Act in 2012, 2013 timeframe. It's over that time span, there's been kind of a siege on the patent system, kind of a weakening of the patent protection. So it's really forced IP leadership to be nimble and be creative about how to protect intellectual property, how to protect that competitive advantage. So patents still play a vital role, but have to be creative about using other forms of protection, bolstering trade secret protection, and having a robust both patent and trade secret protection regime, as well as essentially employing self-help and in the types of business models that you deploy so that the IP is protected by the way in which you monetize the IP through licensing or subscription models for the technology, where your IP is protected based on how the technology is consumed and accessed by your partners and downstream customers.
Tell us a little bit more about that business model piece. Like, what are the business models that you were able to use maybe in the past that kind of you have to be more careful about now, or you kind of have to adjust?
Yeah, there's a couple of different aspects. When you have broad pioneering patents at the onset of a technology, the strategy there could be, as we had in our early days, that building core patents, a portfolio of core patents, and then licensing those patents to fields of use. So there may be an industry where we as a small company couldn't actually deploy products in an ecosystem like the consumer electronics industry or for audience measurement. And so in the media industries, it made much more sense to essentially license the patents to the larger players in the ecosystem. So patent licensing made sense. As the years go by, monetizing your inventions in a classic way by creating a barrier to entry around your products and services makes more sense as the technology matures and is used in more applications. So this over this arc of my career protecting this technology and setting strategy, it's kind of gone through that arc of raw kind of IP licensing, then technology licensing, in the middle, kind of using the technology to form ventures with companies where you can exploit the IP on their core business, but then joint venture to develop new applications for the IP so you can expand the addressable market. And then ultimately, a more classic approach as the technology gets more mature is to use patents on specific improvements and use cases to protect and create a barrier around a product, a particular use case.
So that's interesting. In the beginning, correct me if I'm wrong, Digimarc was focused on innovating, and then they were kind of licensing out their technologies to others to kind of implement the innovations that you were coming up with. Did you notice there was a period of time when maybe those changes that you discussed in the patent system where you were getting more pushback, or did it just was it a more natural kind of, the Digimarc just kind of luck out that the arc followed that? Because you make it sound easy, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, it's very dependent upon where where we came. I think our timing was great because the patent system was really strong in the early days, and it allowed us to set really kind of a brand as being an innovator and a holder of strong IP in the early days. So that set the framework for a robust licensing program. We did have to litigate our patents early on, and that established our IP brand. And from that point on, we were able to license our IP and with not as much friction, without having to enforce the patents as we moved on. And so by the time there were more tools for implementers to challenge patents, we had already established a pretty strong brand and innovative, a strong brand in IP licensing that, we have a strong portfolio. And we just built a strategy of, not being complacent with the innovation that we had, always thinking about what are the disruptive technologies to our core technology and thinking about innovating in those adjacencies and incorporating those in our portfolio. But ultimately, the core patents are going to expire at some point, and we are now developing a model that can scale, that can also get much greater valuation in the financial markets, which is a platform as service or software as service model, where the focus is on getting subscriptions to that platform for use of our technology, and also delivering then network services from the platform that can garner that recurring revenue stream.
I'm sure you've hit upon a lot of the issues that kind of you're thinking about, and there are maybe worrying you. Anything in particular these days that you're like kind of keeping you up at night?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, I think fundamentally the challenge is, how do you continue to extend and protect your competitive advantage? And that's the really exciting and intriguing thing about IP, is that you're at the forefront for your company to help do that. But it's super challenging, right? In the face of a lot of well-funded companies, they're innovating too. So how do you continue to have broad enough protection? And so that's the kind of thing that I think you got to just keep at. You have to continually dedicate yourself to innovating, continually looking at, monitoring the landscape of what's happening in the space, adapting your strategies, but it's a real challenge. Businesses, we're a public company, and financial cycles get measured from quarter to quarter, and it's hard to be thinking about those bigger quantum leaps in innovation. So another challenge is really just getting the resources to be able to continue to innovate, as opposed to doing the tactical improvements that you need as a product company to deliver the product solutions to your customers. So I think the way to address it is to have a team where you have a great understanding of the technology. You're always thinking about and researching the competitive landscape so that you can create more valuable IP more quickly. Another thing that keeps me up at night, but also I think is a great potential, is the use of AI tools to enhance the ability to do more with less, and to be able to hit kind of above your weight class as a smaller company, to be able to generate IP and higher quality IP in a shorter period of time. So marrying that that in-depth knowledge of the technology and the industry with a tool that can rapidly help you construct a really valuable patent asset is really intriguing. And I think we're just at the forefront of being able to tap that technology.
And I guess when you're talking about that piece, is it being able to file more applications more quickly? Is it making sure you have the pipeline from the engineers who are coming up with these innovations, making that more seamless? What part of it?
That's a great question. I mean, I know that there are tools that are being developed for all aspects of invention, harvesting, and vetting. I see the potential in really delivering higher quality, both in the drafting of the application, the speed of drafting a higher quality application, and also helping with the vetting of the prior art, and using the tools to make sure that we're understanding some of the closest prior art. I mean, that really has been a hallmark of our strategy of creating high quality IP over the years, is really being able to understand the prior art and making sure that the IP is being developed in a way that's going to be robust to prior art challenges. So I see that as a value as well.
One thing that you mentioned before is you're concerned about making sure your protection is broad enough. And I don't know if you're for patents, obviously it's the claims that are broad enough. Is there any strategies in line with that? Because obviously you're worried about the prior art, which is in some ways contrary to the goal of you're trying to make sure that those claims you get allowed don't get invalidated, but you're also making sure they're broad enough to cover whatever might be out there. Any strategy that you've adopted that has been helpful for Digimarc to kind of be more secure that you're getting that breadth of protection as well?
I don't know that there's any real magic to it. I think to the extent that you have an understanding of adjacent technologies and how those might be used in conjunction with the core invention, you can maybe anticipate more. We tend to develop patent specifications that we have not only in-depth kind of focus on maybe a core innovation, but really trying to build out and anticipate the adjacencies, the disruptive technologies that might be used as alternatives for certain components of the invention. And we found that, I mean, not necessarily any magic to that, but just to the extent that you can build in those alternatives that can anticipate how the market might go, that can kind of give you that broader protection over time.
So you can file like continuation applications at later points in time to cover whatever might come.
Yeah, I mean, we, any entity that's looking for patent, to be more aggressive patent monetization, a continuation strategy is a must. Is a must. It's a vital part of the strategy. I was a little dismayed to see over the years there's been a couple of runs by the kind of the anti-patent community to really scale back continuation practice, but I think that's really a key part of our patent system, that you should be able to harvest all of the innovations as long as you've adequately disclosed and supported those in your original specification.
Yeah, but it's interesting that it's not something you can kind of start thinking about after your parent application gets allowed. The fact that you're going to be filing cons is something you really have to kind of think about from the beginning of drafting that application, that if you do want to cover things beyond what's in your original claims, then you have to have support for that. Yeah. That's how you'll think that.
Yeah, and that's nothing different with AI technologies. Not only is AI technology something that's a great productivity tool to to generate IP, but it's actually in many ways, and in our case, it's a tool to create implementations. Actually, it's embodiments of our technology. A lot of the components and the processing are AI. So algorithm design has fundamentally changed. It used to be sort of hand optimized algorithms, and now it's design a neural network and let the network optimize the design of the algorithm based on a variety of different loss functions that are programmed in. So now you have to think about, well, I now need to enable the whole new crop of invention that's going to occur around the use of AI as to create alternative embodiments. You have to contemplate all of those inventions as well, which then causes you to again think through the patent eligibility and making sure that you have enough to then allow for patent eligible subject matter when you are describing embodiments that are AI based embodiments as well.
That makes sense. You're kind of leading the IP for your whole company. Is there anything that beyond what we discussed that's a pain point in terms of your day-to-day work that you kind of have to do in your position?
Yeah, I think there's just so many different areas to keep up with. I mean, making sure that we're doing as much as we can with less. There's always that budgetary constraint. So trying to address that with bringing in the efficiencies of AI. Just trying to get an allocation of the R&D time and the key inventor time to think more broadly and to do that invention activity as opposed to just looking at more of short-term
The immediate
the immediate product deliverable issues. So as a public company, you're always having to deliver in the short term, but having the ability to think longer term is kind of a challenge in terms of getting that R&D time to think big thoughts. A lot of companies, and particularly smaller companies, don't have the luxury to give people undirected research time. So that's a challenge.
Any advice about how to help make that happen if that's somebody else?
Well, I think I just always have enjoyed the role of IP also being not just someone who does sort of capture of an invention, harvesting an invention, but actually acting as a catalyst for the invention. So if you can kind of maintain an understanding of the arc of how where technology is going, you can kind of see, maybe act as a catalyst and say, look, is this a possibility for us to maybe innovate in some areas? I can see that our competitive advantage here is in this sector. We have some great competencies there. We have a lead. What about, taking some of these new disruptive technologies and extending on our lead there? So trying to use that knowledge of where things are going to act as a catalyst can kind of maybe help address the needs to continue to innovate and capture that innovation.
That's great advice, really bad. Elevating the role that the IP team could play within the company to really help it succeed, kind of not just an administrative function, I guess. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this wisdom. Last question. What is your favorite patent invention within your company, outside of your company? Anything that stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, they're all our favorite children, so it's hard to pick one out. But I have to just go back to the beginning of my career, starting in the early days with Digimarc, and our founder Jeff Rhodes was really a pioneer of this innovation called digital watermarking, and now I think it's true that no good portfolio is really dependent upon one single patent, but his early patent on the fundamental concepts of weaving, using the inherent noise in imagery in natural content to be a channel to convey data was so fundamental. and that it just enabled this whole field of this technology and many different use cases. So it was, and the thing that was really cool about it is that over time, as we developed applications of this technology and looked at different areas of science that could leverage this technology, we realized how pioneering it was, because even though he didn't initially conceptualize it this way, he thought about the noise in images carrying data. Well, this turns out to be a fundamental concept of spread spectrum communication technology, where you have essentially a spreading key and a sequence that carries data. The notions of some of the security elements were kind of fundamental to cryptography. The technologies in terms of optimizing the channel for communicating information had a lot to do. I know this is getting kind of geeky here, but information theory. So it was really kind of cool to see how someone so creative and thinking in the future, used his own terminology, but you could map it to all these different disciplines in hindsight. We even had a licensee, a big company. We were approaching them to talk about a licensing discussion, and they were vehement that this patent could not have been invented by this one person, and they just they thought that he must have had access to someone else's research or someone on their research team, but that wasn't the case at all. So it was just it was sort of the start of a lot of patent families and development from there, but just really cool to think back about how future thinking that core concept was.
That's pretty cool. And like you mentioned, from the applications in the beginning to now to generative AI, it's kind of pretty awesome. So thank you for telling us the story of that invention as well.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And thank you for coming on Clause8 and sharing a bit of your IP story.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right.